Roll, scene, take.
We are here to talk about a concert you just did.
So I suggested to you that since we had many times produced videos of performances as individual songs, that in this one, for reasons we'll get into in a moment, I thought might be additionally helpful to me to document a little bit more about what was behind the music and behind the concert, and that set the stage for both the audience in this case and the musicians.
So it's the first concert you did in 3 years.
There we go.
COVID break.
Yeah, so this is in 2024, and the pandemic lasted. The pandemic caution limiting public performance lasted until December, for me, until December the 16th, 2023.
How did it feel to be out there again?
It felt I'm hesitating because it's a real mix of feelings, because it was a layered experience. Part of the layering is the way it always is that my aspirations for what we can do together, both within the group, as an individual player, as the leader of the band and monitor of what's going on in translating to an audience and to a fixed period of time we have to play in for each set. So I've got a role that is layered, and in this case was layered more because of the illness that I recently discovered that I have, which is life-threatening, and the outcome of treatment is uncertain at the time of this recording and at the time of the concert. So all of that was known to a significant amount of the audience, partly because some of them are friends, some of them are patients, some of them are patients and friends. And some of them read the newspaper, listen to National Public Radio, which interviewed me about this combination of a return to public performance after 3 years of pandemic caution, coupled with coping with an incidentally discovered life-threatening diagnosis of multiple myeloma. Sorry, correct that. You have to change that. It's interesting, I'll tell you why I came up with that in a little while. Because I'm not the only sick person in my community. At my age, one of our frequent modes of communication is what we call the organ recital, which is not musical in this case, but it's about which organs are giving us trouble as we age, which can take up a lot of otherwise free airtime for old people. malignant melanoma, metastatic malignant melanoma, which had spread to both lungs, causing no apparent symptoms, and discovered on the CAT scan X-ray that was taken for another reason. And what the message that we got from the film was that when compared with 2018, 6 years ago, these findings at the edge of the film of my abdomen that showed the bottom part of my chest was clear in 2018 and is no longer clear. It has nodules and evidence of spread of this cancer. And like many things you're going to be hearing about in this part of what we're doing, they're new to me in some ways and very old to me in other ways. I've been a doctor for 54 years. I've shepherded hundreds of people through diagnoses of cancer. In some ways, there's no news. We all are impermanent. All humans know they're impermanent. Children, somewhere between 7 and 9, figure out that everybody dies, either from pets or grandparents or various other cues. And then when they get older, they make up religions about, eternal life or behaving correctly, etc. But at least from between 9 and 12, children are pretty clear that everybody dies. Even good people, even their parents, grandparents, and pets they love. And I think from then on, as best I can tell, we rehearse that fact, how to meet that fact. How does one meet one's own disincarnation? It's a word I just made up, I don't know if it's a word. So we're incarnated in this form of speech and cognition and communication, aspirations, and so on. And on some level, and many meditations about grieving and dying reference the fact that on some level we can't actually do it. We can't actually imagine it. And yet, here we are talking about it. And we think about it more or less consciously almost all the time. It's the sort of elephant in the room. The mainspring is I'm alive, I'm liking or not liking some aspects of that, I'm enjoying or not liking some aspects of the self that I'm in touch with or that I sense myself to be expressing or sharing. And on another level of it, I'm not really responsible for any of it because it's it exists in such an awesome mystery of what it is to be alive, what it is to be aware of being aware. And as a skeptic about explanations that derive from organized religions about this, I'm nonetheless awed and inspired, I suppose, by the mystery. The size of the universe, as we've been able to now tell with the current new technology, the length of time that even we can gauge, are just so big and so spacious, so full of possibility, that whatever I feel myself thinking or saying feels like a stab at reality, like a kind of a guess, which accumulates over decades. I'm about to be 80 in a month or so. And the combination of doing a concert at the same time I was navigating this unexpected and dire prognosis and choices around treatments that are both remarkably more effective than they were 10 years ago, but nevertheless they're still associated with a death rate of 85% of the people affected with my condition within 5 years, with or without treatment. Partly, of course, is my advanced age itself of 80, so I may die of something else. Look on the bright side, and not die of this particular disease. Having said that lame joke, I would add another lame type of joke. I'm glad I didn't die right away 10 weeks ago. Why is he saying that? Because at the same time as getting this dire diagnosis, it brings with it a sharpening of one's awareness of your impermanence and your finitude, our awareness and our finitude. And in sharing it with people in my communities, families, friends, colleagues, bandmates, and then the public, doing a public performance and getting coverage of that. Introduces a reflection both from inside about how I feel about it, and then how literally thousands of other people known to me and vice versa feel about it. I don't know what percentage of people have this experience in the way that I have. When I retired from practice after 5 decades and stopped taking care of patients, well, I kept teaching and still am teaching, I got a similar response to the grieving, I suppose, in a way, about my retirement from the people that were feeling that they got a benefit from knowing me and being held by me as their diagnostician, prognostician, friend in medicine. I think of medicine as a calling, not a profession or a job measured by how much you get paid, but measured by how much you love it and how much you love the people that you're caring for. Caring is the whole point. Because we all know that we're impermanent and that we're in the process, while alive, of one of our realities is to monitor how we're doing, and if it's different or adverse, to have recourse for advice, for figuring out what it might be and what there might be to ameliorate or cure.
Is there a piece of music that encapsulates some of the emotions of where you're at right now?
I wouldn't think of a piece, because my process in the last 3 years especially, because I wasn't really accountable to the public very much. I did record remotely with through the technology, not in the same room, sometimes across the country, sometimes in other countries. But in front of one-to-one or inside the same space didn't really happen. So I was in some way freed from any commercial or presentation expectations. And I just put my hand on the keys, which is what I plan on doing in a moment if you'd like me to play something, without thinking about what tune I'm going to play or what might come out. I use those as germs as a composer then to generate whatever else might happen. So here they are, and I put them on the keys. And the space and the silence and the notes played and the notes not played, just where I'm groping to try to communicate with people that I don't know who will be maybe watching this at some other point in time. And part of the motivation for asking my beloved friend and colleague, partner in crime, Brad, in documenting our band over these decades, is to express to some degree the similarity between this creative process of trusting oneself, using chance and context of unfamiliarity to free you up to be more in touch with, well, what is it that you want to play? How about now? How about this moment? For the listener or the performer, and hopefully both, that it will matter to both, that the expectations set up by playing a slightly different version, or and I might say another word now or another phrase. That's what we're doing when we're playing. That's the language we're speaking, and we're don't necessarily know, because I don't know what's the next word that's going to come out or what conceptual frame might be opened or not. In 1970-something, 73, I wrote an article with a patient of mine called An Experience of Cancer in Harper's Magazine. And the article arose because the patient, whose name was John Bennett, co-authored it with me in the following way. I was caring for him. He was a professor at Harvard Business School, and whatever happened to him was product. Everything was turned into reflective experience, some kind of opening to an examination of what's true, what's not true, what's good, what's bad. He was a very fluent writer, thinker, and very productive in the way he turned his experience into something that he hoped would be meaningful and useful to others. I diagnosed him with cancer of the back of his tongue. It's a particularly difficult cancer to diagnose because it often is there for a while before it becomes evident to the patient, by which time it's spread. It's an awkward place to do surgery or radiation without causing collateral damage that can affect swallowing or breathing. And I diagnosed him and was able to orchestrate his referral to Mass Eye and Ear to a ear, nose, and throat doctor who was very effective at diagnosing it and arranging for radiation therapy, which cured him. That doctor's approach to patient care was very different than mine. The patient described the following to me. I would come into the office, the staff would put me in the chair in which I was going to be seen, and put a device in my mouth to hold it open in the optimal position for the doctor to see what needed to be seen. I never spoke to the doctor after the first visit. I always had an apparatus in my mouth during the entire visit. Cured the patient. Just a reflection of what I think the missed opportunity for the doctor. Patient fortunately had a doctor who would like to talk and listen and know who he was, knew his wife and his children, etc. And at the end of this, John looked at me. He said, "This turned out better than you thought, didn't it?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I'll tell you what. I'll interview you, you interview me. What were we thinking was going to be happening and what was happening as we went along, and tell the story together. As far as I know, this is still the only article ever written and published that I know by a doctor and a patient about cancer talking like that in two voices." Because this was a very successful article, got a lot of publicity, a lot of people cited it. We did dog and pony shows all over the place, on television, on national forums. And he got to know me quite well in other ways than as his doctor, because we traveled around together to do some of these events. And he said to me, "Do your students and residents know that you play music?" I said, "No." He said, "Why?" I said, "Well, I think it's not professional for me to mix these two things." He said, "Oh, no. They need to know you can be a doctor that is passionate and committed and knowledgeable and busy, and have other things that you do that you love and do with passion and commitment. And I would argue is part of the reason why you are who you are to me." So since then, must you know, students have to listen to all I know. Okay.
I've talked to many people in your office, many patients. Everybody talks about, "Tell me about Stanley." "Well, he sat me down and he made me listen," or "he played for me," or that's your introduction. That's most people's introduction to you, it seems like.
I think at a certain point, it's interesting, and I think that it's a fine point, because there's crucial differences between, let me put it a different way. There's a way to share what else you do that brings out what's common between you as humans. And that's different than performing for people or impressing them with your music. I also had a lot of musicians as patients, because there's quite a lot of physical problems that are associated with playing the oboe or the French horn, or problems with your airway, problems with your fingers, orthopedic positions. So along with playing with a lot of people, they also felt comfortable with me, so they also became my patients. So I think apart from what John Bennett encouraged me to do with students and residents, the musicians would, either we had just played together and wanted to hear what we did, or they were wanting to know for musical reasons. And then I don't know how that started with people who were not musicians. I honestly don't remember that. I don't know when I began to feel that it was actually a part of sharing myself with them. I feel a little bit awkward when I'm thinking about it, because I think if I heard about this as a story, it would raise questions in me about, well, did he actually take care of you? Did he know what was wrong with you? Or is he a good doctor? And the message I'm getting from, I think I can literally safely say, from thousands of people is yes to both. I just recently played for about 500 people after 3 years of not playing for anybody in public, sold out shows, and people were moved and enthusiastic. And as far as I will, I'll 2 or 3 days ago, I wasn't feeling good psychologically about having this diagnosis. Not the first or last time that'll happen, and it fluctuates over the couple months I've known about it. When I get communications from patients and colleagues since my illness, I can read 1 or 2 of them a day sometimes, and it's about as much as I can manage in terms of the emotional response from people that I've known for 40 or 50 years in a collegial relationship. I may have trained them 3, 4 decades ago, if they're colleagues. Now they're my boss, or run the courses I teach in. Is that kind of coming back around again, giving back what's happened. And patience. And it brings me to tears often. And it feels like it's not something I can do a lot of at once. It's like they're very, very, they're intended to matter to me, and they do. So I'm just going to read 1 or 2 of these. This is from a couple of days ago, and it's representative of what I'm getting almost every day. Sometimes by the score, and sometimes a couple. Dear Stanley, I find it unbearable and terrifying to think that I will probably have to face my own death without you to guide me through the process. I mean, I am close enough to death now to feel its awesome weight and to search for the comfort I can find. I knew without a doubt I could count on you to help me face it with some peace and dignity, and I'm frightened to think I might have to face it without you. I said it was a layered concert, and this is what's happening with me and around me. I confess that I'm embarrassed by the selfishness of this thought. Profound regret that you might not be there to care for me. But I think I found some wisdom and tapped into my extraordinary admiration for you by recognizing and experiencing the selfishness. To explain to myself and to whoever might be watching this, I'm not overcome. I'm not overwhelmed. I'm deeply moved. And it feels good to express it. I wouldn't miss this for the world. I would not have wanted to just not wake up, to be spared the shock. No, it's okay. And it feels delicate. I'm vulnerable, but not phobic. I don't feel hard done by. I don't feel like it's an unfair plight or this shouldn't be happening. Why me? Or any of that. Most of the time. Sometimes I do think all of that. You are and have been throughout the time I have known you, more than 45 years, a great and kind man who chose to become a doctor. Felicitous wordsmithing, I think. Maybe true. True for him for sure. You have faithfully fulfilled that vocation with dedication, passion, skill, and humanity. It is a vocation of service to others. Faithful and skilled pursuit of that vocation requires an absolute commitment to caring for others. That's the whole point. The just reward for this care lies in the gratitude that others feel for the care you have given to them, the many ways in which their lives have been protected and enriched by your skillful and generous care. I trust then that you might take some comfort and joy. Sound the trumpets of joy in this season of despair, from the simple, awesome fact that you've cared for me and my beloved family for over 45 years. For all that time, and in all the seasons of joy and despair, you've held us in your skillful, loving hands, and we have flourished. We will love you for this care for as long as we live. That's what I'm getting from the world. Should be enough. And it is.
Perhaps a musical interlude?
Okay. So, what is it about music and medicine that are both so salient to my experience of communication, I suppose. Poetry and music have something in common that way. They do something that prose and the spoken word don't. They limn something. Maybe it's the mystery that we're talking about earlier on in this interview. But confronting one's own dying has become made easier for me by understanding that what I'm feeling is not a mood change. I'm not depressed by expressing sadness or tears. I'm evincing an apposite emotional response to a reality, or including the uncertainty of how that reality will play itself out in time, or in the experience of discomfort or other effects of either the treatment or the disease. I'm grieving. I'm not sad because I'm depressed. And grieving feels like a much more malleable frame of reference to cultivate acceptance, managing the consequences of fatigue or pain or decreased appetite, or there's many serious side effects that happen with the treatment of my condition, some of which I do have at various levels of severity. And for the next ongoingness, actually, because even after you finish, the best outcome for my treatment is that I have tolerable side effects, and I have activity on the tumor from the treatment that either arrests its further development, or it can even make it shrink and become invisible, even though it's still present by chemical testing. And at the end of 2 years, if you've done that with this particular regimen, a significant minority of people can go off the medication, and their body will continue to maintain what the medication enabled it to do. However, the side effects can occur after you're off the medication at any time. If your body is now doing what the medicine trained it to do, ostensibly, apparently, it also can continue to be liable to the effects on other organs of that same ramping up of the immune response. So I need to lean into how to learn how to be a patient with an uncertain prognosis that will stay uncertain for as long as I'm aware of the word prognosis. Wrap your mind around that, folks, listening to this. I don't find it easy all the time. I don't find it easy hardly any of the time, that aspect of it. Any symptom I get, flushed, itchy, sneezing, coughing, could, and sometimes is, the beginning of a side effect. For me, already. I'm having trouble maintaining my appetite, my weight, my sleep. I have more musculoskeletal pains. I have weakness. My exercise capacity is quite profoundly affected already. Is this the disease? Is this the immunotherapy? There is no relationship between the side effects and the outcome of treatment. You can have the best outcome with no side effects ever. You can have a lot of side effects and it's not working at all. So even that is not a useful way that a patient can tell whether it's worth it. Is it a Hail Mary? I don't think that I'm choosing that so far, and I don't think I will choose it if this particular treatment doesn't work or is intolerable. This might be the end of the line for me, but I'm trying to take the advice I've given hundreds of people, and sometimes take myself, which is to make one decision at a time and absorb and digest what that one decision produces before you worry about whether you would do another thing or how you might manage another additional, perhaps exponential, increased risk and or some benefit from taking a second drug as well. So I'm trying, except for this little presentation now, not to dwell on that. You notice, Brad, that I am talking a lot about this, more than I expected to be talking about. We all know that this is going to happen. And I painted this picture of how edified I am and how validated I am by the feedback I've gotten about how I've come across to either the musical public or the medical colleagues and patients, trainees, etc. And not everybody's going to be as comforted as I am being by having as much of that. But I would say to anybody that is listening to it, certainly seek it out for yourself if you're in my plight. As cheerful as I got reading this letter, I'm deeply moved by having evoked that response and love that person in that way, reciprocally, before this letter, and just says what we already know to be true but between ourselves and countless thousands of people.
Your words remind me of blues music, which some people think of as being, oh, it's depressing, it's depressive and whatever. But blues music, to me, embodies the same kind of dual hope, despair quality that you're talking about.
Well, that in the context of grief, that's why it's so meaningful, because you wouldn't be grieving unless you loved life. You wouldn't be singing the blues unless you wanted someone to hear how you were feeling. The word emotion itself, emotio, etymologically, to move. It makes you do something. And in case of grieving, which is doing something, you're noting that you're fearing, in the case of anticipatory grief, a loss of something that you love, that you're afraid to lose because it's something you are attached to or enjoy, savor, approve of. And the trick is to allow yourself to feel the fear and the grief and the pain and the uncertainty at the same time as you note that you're so appreciative of the things that you have. I'm breathing right this moment, easily and freely. This is not my last breath. I know this one. I can now say. But any one of them could be. And in the blues, just because your woman, was unfaithful to you, someone else was kicking in your stall or whatever, you're not singing that so as to you're never going to have another woman, or you're still here. And you care about it, and you grieving, but grieving in a bittersweet way with energy and drive and momentum to create the possibility of hope. And hope is not a reckless disregard for reality. That's fantasy. Nothing wrong with it. It's okay, but that's not what I'm talking about when I say the word hope. Hope is the ability to imagine that things could be better or different. Period. It gives you possibility. And I have hope in abundance. I think I'm going to die from this disease. I don't think this treatment's going to work for me. My family doesn't like to hear me say that. But I think statistically I'm on very solid ground. I've got widespread disease in both lungs. I have no idea. I should say I have no idea. My intimation is that I'm going to die from this disease. It's not going to work. Yes, there's some people for whom extended survival does occur for the first time that this is considered an incurable disease at this stage. But we do have a significant minority of people who are now being helped. Caller.
You want to play a quick blues?
Sure. So what makes that a blues is the bittersweet quality that you're talking about. And it's achieved musically by mixing major and minor keys. And it could never have happened without Africa and Europe sharing and cross-fertilizing their cultures. And I suppose that's the other parallel. Being a doctor requires you to care for your patients in whatever bittersweet combination they're presenting themselves to you. You may not like them. You may not approve of their over smoking or drinking or not wearing a seatbelt and then having a car accident or any number of differences in age or religion or worldview. But in the context of caring for the person, there's no stone unturned to care for them and have them feel respected and dignified and met where they are. It's a refuge of moral aptitude, bioethical awareness. It's a privilege for both sides. Being trusted, whether it's as a colleague in medicine or music, is very moving experience. To feel kind of reciprocity, the creative common. Helping a patient to tell their story is very much the same. Helping a student to figure out why their first guess wasn't the only guess they could have made, and if it was wrong, why the better choice is better and was more supported by the encounter, elements of the encounter. Same in music. Same in any art form, same in any expression.
I have gleaned from you that jazz music is a metaphor for life, and in particular both the improvisational and the collaborative qualities that you bring to playing to your concerts. I know that's really important to you. And from you I hear how that projects into all types of experiences.
And there's some good documentation, from neuroscience, that this stuff is, there are many parallels that also present the same way when you're looking at functional MRIs, which parts of the brain are lighting up, which neural networks are being engaged, how memory is developed for the structure and function of musical elements and so on. How ease and trust create a safety to experiment, but also to recover with mistakes or mistakes.
So how'd the concert go?
People liked it. I was artistically, I liked it too, and I liked that we were able to combine the awareness of the heavy things we've been talking about with the exuberance of playing. It's an interesting word we use for music, isn't it? Considering how much hard work goes into the proficiency needed to be able to do it and remember all of that stuff. I suppose sports, the iteration, you have to be able to enjoy practicing, getting good at it by repetition until it becomes body or muscle memory, and you're not thinking anymore, you're just, I feel when I'm playing well and supported well by other musicians, I'm playing better than I can play without that. There's a narrative, I suppose, that music expresses non-verbally, that just like with verbal expression, can be fostered. For example, if you are interviewing a patient and you ask them to tell you why they came to see you, and they give you a chief complaint, I have a headache, and then you ask questions, well, when did it start? You have various ways in which to help them tell you the story. But imagine if instead of that, or along with that, you said, so nice to see you today. How can I help you today? What would help you today? Same in music. I sit at the keys, I look at somebody, and I say, okay. Okay, what's next? How can you help me today?
You had your band helping you? You felt it. You had special guests come out?
Two of the people on the stage I've known in South Africa from when I was young. Anton Fig, the drummer. I'm 5 years older than him. No, more, 9 years older than him. But I've known him all his life, and he's known me all his life. And we've shared a lot of things aside of certainly a lot of music, but also a lot of life context in which being a musician and touring a lot and having families and all of that, we had lots of intersections around managing being an artist in a world where that's not always made so easy. It's another piece of that musicians need to support each other in that way, because in our worst moments we think we're only playing for ourselves and nobody else understands what we're doing. So that tune I've been playing since I'm a teenager. I still don't know how to play this tune to my satisfaction. So let me modify that, because that's a little harsh, too harsh. I still can imagine ways that this could be better or different. And in my better moments, which are quite often around this issue, I keep playing this tune for a few days sometimes. Every time I pass the keyboard, I'm just trying to get it into my spirit and into my body, so that what's going to come out is going to be something that matters to me and to the people with whom I'm playing, or for whom I'm playing. But first I have to please myself. I suppose the other thing that might be a companion to people watching the DVD, the videos, and associating it with this sort of documentary interview, is that there really isn't one right way to do it. There's lots of meritorious choices. And being intent on pleasing yourself and sharing that pleasure is what a successful performance included on this night of this concert. It did feel to us in the band that we were pleasing ourselves, and that pleasure was being shared and reciprocated. So let me try that little piece again and see how the bridge goes this time. Inward bound, not power. So I'm trying to think what else I'd want to say. I feel drained. There's a kind of an emptiness that's a part of this ground of being, of sort of learning how to process the layer of increased awareness of impermanence with mundane, banal, ongoing eating, sleeping, walking, sitting down. Everything's different and nothing's changed. And so much like film and music and poetry that move in time, the phenomenon is that something happens that sets up an expectation or a feeling, and then something happens after that, conditioned by what came before, and sets up another possibility because of that sequence, which is either satisfied or denied in artful ways, hopefully. You're either surprised, like a cadence, which could be like, and that's a sequence where everybody knows you're home again, okay? As opposed to, that's called a deceptive cadence. It's very close, but you're not there yet.
Not there yet.
And those kinds of little tricks that people do happen all the time in speech and music and jokes and scripts. What you expect and what you get. And I suppose that's what I'm finding myself talking much more about this than I thought I would, because this is what's going on for me all the time. Is I'm ordinary, but then I find I just can't eat anymore. My appetite's gone. During a meal, I'm talking about moment by moment. I'll suddenly notice that I'm not the same person I was a few weeks ago. Whether it's the disease, whether it's the medicine, I don't know. And can't easily know. But I'm not, I don't have the vantage point of not being reminded there's something else to attend to, a different way of being aware.
Is your practice of medicine or your practice of jazz, you think, helping you?
Good, that's a lovely question. I think that both are helping me. I mean, in music, a little thing can make a huge difference. A note played or not played, or in a certain way of telling the story. How can I help you today? What would help you today? Is there anything I can do to help you today? Anything. If I can bring that to myself, then I'm doing what I did in medicine, I'm doing what I did in music. And I'm good at doing it in both places. How good am I doing it for myself is the project, because the diminishment of oneself, the grief about things not done, mistakes that got made, things that weren't completed, tasks that proved to be too difficult to accomplish. When you're thinking about dying in a shorter time rather than a longer time, those things tend to have an edge. On one level they have an edge, on another level they don't matter at all anymore. And both are absolutely true. If there was a mistake, and if a restitution can't be made, it can't be made. The thing is broken. And the gracefulness, the grace in being able to acknowledge that and accept that about yourself and everybody else too, is a lot of what this grieving includes, because it eases the suffering. The supernumerary suffering, the suffering that doesn't impel you and motivate you to apologize or make restitution. There's a purpose to suffering that's useful also. It gets you to be motivated, emodio, to do something different than you're doing so you can clean it up or apologize for not being able to. But to befriend yourself in a plight, how would you treat a friend in this plight? Probably not by encouraging them to marginalize or diminish themselves. Probably isn't what would help them that day, or any day. I shouldn't say any day. There's some days it probably is useful. I suppose I've got to also make a parallel between being a grandparent and a teacher and a doctor and a musician and a band leader and the owner and founder of a company and an employer of, 50, 60 people for 50 years or so over time. Mistakes do get made. Things do get left incomplete. Some things didn't work. And there's a way of being with those less comfortable than the kinds of things that produced a letter like the one I read earlier. That's just as true. And just as much in need of befriending, telling the truth about it, and forgiving. Forgiveness, I suppose, is the other piece. What is forgiveness? If grieving is the registration of the love you have for what you're imagining you might be losing, then forgiveness is the willingness to give to the person, in this case yourself, as before the transgression occurred. Forgive, to give as before. Etymology of words is interesting, very interesting to me. One that students often like is, what's the etymology of orthopedics? Do you know?
No idea.
What does ortho mean? Orthodoxy. Ortho. Straight.
Ortho in math.
Straight.
Yeah.
Making children straight. Orthopedics.
Ah.
Clubfoot. Medicine is fascinating. It's such an interesting thing. The whole field of pediatrics. The idea that children are not little adults, that they have their own evolution of being, physically, emotionally, socially, that requires a discipline to understand it, to study it, to respond to good and bad parts of it, to foster the good parts, to ease the suffering of the parts that are not so good. There's so much that unites our ability to care for each other or register that we are not doing as well as we would have liked or would like. So it's a time of reckoning, of accountability, which the skillful ways that I'm being encouraged and invited in my meditating work is to transform sorrow into a recognition about that it's sorrow because you've been happy. And you know what not being sorrowful feels like. And if this sorrow is about losing that, it can transform that, the way the sorrow feels, to be more like gratitude. That's the plan. I do have to say, I'm not in touch at the moment with my power or my eloquence or being a great musician or a successful anything. I'm drained and tired and talking.
I don't think that comes across too strongly.
Well, it comes across to me, so I want to make sure that it comes across strongly.
The
cracks are what lets the light in, Leonard Cohen said, and I am a cracked person at the moment, and I have strength and I have weakness, and they're both evident to me.
Had an event prior to the diagnosis that I think has brought you a lot of joy and gratitude. Indeed. About a year and a half ago, huh?
Yeah, Lila is my grandchild who's about to be 2 and has a very distinct personality. You could look at pictures of her. The nurses at her birth said, this kid is a pistol. Some people come into the world and they're sort of reclusive. They're not quite sure if they can trust this, quiet. And others, what's up? Let's have some fun. She's the second. And she's attentive, she's resilient, she's enthusiastic, contagiously so. She walks into this house, this is a house she knows very well, and she's got a number of things she likes to do here. And usually by the end of the time, whatever time it is, she's gotten to just about all of them. She's got her little rounds that she does. And that's contagious for us. Many of the things that I've talked about, I've shared with you in this, about trust and fostering courage and by dignified caring for people and communicating with them. She elicits that, and she has a family very much wanting her to feel that she can trust us, and she's loved and wanted, and anything that she knows or wants to share with us has an audience. And in a rhetorical way, I could and do sometimes see myself like her trying to learn how to talk about something I've never had to talk about before. I have never had to talk about my own uncertainty before in quite the same way. And I look to her for how she manages to, she probably knows, Sadie, her mom, younger daughter, thinks she's may have about 100 words that we can understand, and probably about 200 that we can't, but she says them more than once, so they mean something to her. And sometimes we think we know what they mean. She plays games with us when we're not sure what the rules are, but they're enjoyable anyway. You must have had that as a parent.
Has she affected your music? Her presence somehow?
You know, I've been thinking about and wanting to write a piece for her and about her and have not come up with it yet. She's very responsive to music and to rhythm. And she will look immediately at me if there's prospect of music. And his music teacher in daycare sits right next to that guy, watches what he's doing and everything. He's very interested in it. It would not surprise me at all if she's gifted at that as well. She's doing the same stuff I'm doing. I think kids are natural philosophers, and they deal with issues of fairness and kindness and reciprocity and how you make your needs known and how you're coming across and all that. And she's avid to learn and avid to master, I feel like I'm working the grief material in the way that I see her working. You know, their work is play. And probably one of the biggest critics that we have about how we managed the pandemic was the degree to which perhaps we could have been more skillful about how to maintain play and social contact for kids with a little less of lockdowns. And I think that's something that we learned from this pandemic. That's a good example of, where we could have done something better or different. We could imagine we could have done something better or different. We hoped we would be able to do that better or different another time. Now, that's kind of what that hope means. It comes, like grief comes from disappointment, it comes from the aspiration to not be disappointed. So if you can notice both things at the same time, some of us can ease our suffering a bit that way. So that's the project. And Lila, kids and animals that trust us and love us give us the same opportunity to be reminded. Well, here's, I think it was yesterday or the day before, someone asked me a question. Oh, yeah. I was talking to a friend of mine that runs a school for children with special needs and families with special needs. And she's known me for a very long time. I used to be the doctor for that school, helped to make policies during the pandemic, also all this kind of stuff. We've been friends for 50 years or so. And she asked me about my childhood when I was in relation to what I'm doing, happening now. And I realized that when I was born into my family, they had never had a child have the kind of abnormalities that I had in abundance. And I went through 16 sets of operations during my life, 3 years separated from my peers, not in school, in foreign countries. I had a different childhood than many children have. And my parents were encouraged by the doctor and by the nursing sister who came to help my mom in the early postpartum period when she came home from the hospital, not to coddle me. That otherwise I would be at risk of being a cripple in my personality and would think of myself as defective and not capable. They should toughen me up, was what my parents told me they were told as a grown-up. And I think that was interpreted, I was told it was interpreted, to keep me a little cold. If I had a bath, to rub me a little bit with a towel with a little bit of extra vigor, to kind of brace me, tone me up. I was praised and rewarded for being normal. I was never, in my memory, ever given empathy for having a challenge to overcome in order to be able to achieve normally. And I think that was an honest mistake, and I would have been a better balanced person in terms of this issue of self-diminishment and asking and getting comfort from others. I learned that from other people through my life. And I think I realized from the time I was about 6 that it would be better to be a doctor than to be doctored. So I think that made me a better doctor too, because I saw it from both sides then and now. And my daughters have fed back to me that they never ever felt that I didn't let them know that they were coping with something that required coping and merited extra support and kindness and encouragement. And that they never felt stigmatized for needing that or wanting that. I think my parents missed an opportunity there, and therefore I did. And I think music also reflected an activity which was without words, that does what words can't do, that gave me expression of some of the coping, struggle, challenge in a sanctioned way. I could play the blues. You're supposed to be doing that then, right? You wouldn't be singing the blues unless there was something to be blue about as well as blues about. So I'm hoping that the music that is on the DVD as well will give me and whoever's looking at it at some other point in time that kind of feeling of the celebration of being aware of suffering as a beginning of a story, but not the end of the story. Maybe that's what I have to say about this. my love, you do me wrong to cast me off discourteously, for I have loved you well and long, delighting in your company. Green sleeves was all my joy, green sleeves was my delight, green sleeves was my heart of gold. And who but my lady green sleeves? So this is what we've been talking about for the last half hour, celebrating something that you loved and lost. Good choice of a tune.
Life imitates art.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And that was full of mistakes and stumbling. When I'm learning a tune, or relearning a tune, I often deliberately try to be a naive. I look at the music, then look away and see what I can remember. I sort of want to learn it by letting it seep into me. Mistakes and all, and then it becomes a vehicle where I'm not worried about it anymore. And I'm relearning this to get it to be fluent and get it to be spacious.
And then I hope you get to In Walked Bud eventually.
Yes,
That one.
there is that. Yep. So I've gotten a lot, including in this passage, of reward for who I am and how I am. And if I'm not grateful for that, I need to keep cultivating it. So that's what I'm doing. Amen.
Cut.
Oh, I've got to put it. Don't we put it? Yeah.
I get it. Yes. That should be on camera again. That's what it's all about. Just being able to.
Say when it's over.
You do it upside down when it's over, when it's the end.
Okay.
It's called a tail slate. Here's the tail slate.
Here's the tail slate.
Beautiful.
Take that.
Take that.